things that are happening indigenously on the internet have to do with the people that are there and the organizations that are there. And as far as the internet is concerned, there are plenty of organizations that had to be made for the functioning of the internet itself. This article from 2005 is telling us about how such organizations could be deemed indigenous. It is highly debatable whether there is a technical need for the ITU to play a key role in DNS management. The DNS is not an extension of the International Telephone Numbering System, and any issues raised by the future convergence of the internet and telephony can be handled through interinstitutional coordination with organizations indigenous to the internet environment. At the same time, it is also debatable whether the ITU serving as a depository for the GTLD MOU by itself would have had a negative impact on the internet's development, although the larger contours of that agreement arguably have. ICANN has followed key elements of the GTLD MOU approach and has favored trademark holders and well-organized interest at the expense of a more open and expansive namespace, but that is another matter. Another matter indeed. Those ITUs and ICANNs and GTLD MOUs are giving us a idea of exactly how the spaces had to be coordinated into a variety of organizations. And in this context here, ITU is the International Telecommunication Union, the regulator for telecommunication, including telephones. That is something that exists in the non-digital world as a result, something that existed as part of the analog networks. But it became invested in the possibility of regulating the internet, especially DNS management. DNS is Domain Name Service. This is what allows you as a person to access a variety of internet websites. DNS allows you to connect your home computer to a server that has an address that is just a bunch of numbers using not numbers, using words and things that are a little bit more meaningful than code, essentially. So a layer of code on top of another code that allows the code in your computer to talk to the internet code. And this is how we have the possibility of this GTLD MOU, GTLD being a generic top-level domain. So a domain being another form of territory, again, something that you could say is indigenous to the internet. But we are told here that there is an interinstitutional coordination with organizations indigenous to the internet environment. So there is a way according to which the analog or traditional conventional ways to do our institutions could connect to another kind of institution, one that exists in a different space altogether and that would be more specific to the digital realm. So there is, on the one hand, this awareness that the conventional ways to do regulation would not apply to the internet, as well as the awareness that the so-called indigenous organizations would be better suited to deal with the issue of the digital world itself. Now, the GTLD MOU, summarized here from Wikipedia, the generic top-level domain name memorandum of understanding, is a document prepared by the Internet Ad Hoc Committee, a committee that is made ad hoc for internet things when it became important for the conventional organizations to figure out how to deal with the internet. Because, well, this thing was moving a little bit fast, and the traditional conventional regulators had to figure out very quickly how to deal with that. And so the GTLD MOU contains proposals to resolve the problem associated with domain name system, DNS. As we mentioned, the GTLD MOU proposed the creation of new GTLDs and to transfer the management of the DNS to the US government to a self-regulatory organization composed of members of both the public and private sectors, with online alternative dispute resolution being administered by WIPO and others. The document was introduced by the Internet community in 1997. The ITU, International Telecommunication Union, as we just mentioned a second ago, Secretary General, was responsible for circulating the GTLD MOU and inviting public and private internet stakeholders to voluntary support and actively participate the implementation process. So the idea here is that the internet, being a vast expanse, or as we mentioned yesterday, somewhat of a new frontier that has a code that allows you to locate things using not so human readable or human legible systems, would require a level of understanding between us and the machines that may allow the communication to happen a little bit more seamlessly. And the top level domain, as they are mentioned here, are essentially stuff like .com. That's your generic top level is a .com, is an address that is available at, something.com. That's a generic top level. Eventually, we needed to expand these GTLDs to other things because we ran out of addresses on the legible spectrum, if you will. The internet itself did not run out of addresses. In fact, it multiplied those addresses as the internet expanded, but the ways to access that became a little bit more complicated. And it is related to another organization that was mentioned on the previous slide, ICANN. ICANN, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. To reach another person on the internet, you have to type in an address to your computer, a name or a number. That address must be unique so computers know where to find each other. ICANN coordinates these unique identifiers across the world. Without that coordination, we wouldn't have one global internet. In more technical terms, ICANN helps coordinate the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority functions, which are key technical services critical to the continued operation of the Internet's underlying address book, the DNS, the domain name system, as we mentioned in the last slide. So ICANN is a nonprofit. This is another group of people that has been organized on the internet since the 90s, although it became a subcontract of the US government, the Commerce Department especially. The idea was that the US government would have some kind of role for the early organization of the domain name system, but eventually it would be replaced by this group of people from a variety of so-called stakeholders from the community, from the technical businesses, from the government, for anyone that has any kind of thing to do on the internet, so that eventually everyone would be able to control how the address system works. So again, we are mixing a bunch of domains, a bunch of interests, a bunch of people to create a system that allows the humans that we are to deal with the digital world that we are living in. 2014, new developments in the system to support an enhanced multi-stakeholder model of internet policymaking in governments. The U.S. Commerce Department's National Telecommunications and Information Administration, NTIA, today announces its intent to transition key internet domain name functions to the global multi-stakeholder community. As the first step, NTIA is asking the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers to convene global stakeholders to develop a proposal to transition the current role played by the NTIA in the coordination of the Internet's domain name system. So, from 1997 to 2014, we start to slowly transition this system to have access to this global multi-stakeholder system that is hopefully, at least as far as the process is concerned, separate from the US government and, generally speaking, probably from any national government's purview. And it took quite a while, of course, to make this system work because you have a lot of interest and you have also a lot of people with a lot of vested interest in making this system work in a specific way rather than having this wild frontier, if you will. And of course, this large system became a political fight over who may or may not have a say in the way the domain name system works. 2018. Senator Cruz tells us Congress has 22 days to protect freedom on the internet. In 22 short days, the Congress fails to act. The Obama administration intends to give away control of the internet to an international body akin to the United Nations, Senator Cruz said. I rise today to discuss the significant, irreparable damage this proposed internet giveaway would wreak not only on our nation, but on free speech across the world. The Obama administration is instead pushing through a radical proposal to take control of domain names and instead give it to the international organization ICANN that includes 162 foreign countries, all the countries that are not the United States, essentially. And if that proposal goes through, it will empower countries like Russia, like China, like Iran to be able to censor speech on the internet, your speech. Countries like China, Russia, and Iran are not our friends, and their interests are not our interest. So the Obama administration apparently invented in 2018 a thing that already was proposed in 1997 to allow for everyone and anyone to have access to the internet, including Iran, China, and of course 162 other countries that are also involved in this, but apparently only Iran, China, and Russia would be the problematic ones here. And of course, they would be able to censor the internet, just like Russia, China, and Iran are already censoring the internet in their own countries, the things that they do on a routine basis, and some things that they do not need the Obama administration to do. They are able to block certain websites from having access to their own local internet. The global website, the internet that we all share, is in fact segmented into other groups because of this very system of top level and domain names. And of course, the new domain names that exist, so we were talking about .coms, but for example, one of the new ones that became relevant in the mid 2010s was a domain name that was .xxx. I will let you guess what those are for, which obviously was very controversial in certain political cycles. And the larger idea here is that the internet was controlled by the United States up until that point, up until the Obama administration. And well, as you probably guessed, that is not the case. It never had any kind of control over the internet as a whole because the internet is shared, it's distributed, it is decentralized. And this is not something that has to do with the Obama administration any more than it has to do with the Russia or Iran or anybody of the sort. Other governments have no increased role in this system that is proposed by the ICANN organization. This is a way in which a whole lot of people would be globally participating in the process. But there is, after all, this weird way in which the addresses that exist on the internet is a matter of a very specific understanding, an understanding that is, at least as far as the earlier years of the internet, something that has been understood by the US policy a lot more than it has been understood by the international policy. This article here points out to the internet as a territory itself. Remember, this conversation is about indigenous folks and people being indigenous to the internet as a whole. If you consider the DNS, the domain name system, as a map, then you can consider the internet being a territory with the addresses that you can compare to the map that is the DNS. And this is just focusing on how those different parts of the internet are accessible using a specific form of addresses of packets. And those packets are overlaid. This becomes the web. So the most important overlay here, a layer, is DNS, the DNS that has a structure that keeps the internet together / accessible / machine legible by both people and the internet itself. If you do not have a way to see where the addresses are, you do not have a way to see what is going on the internet. And of course, that could create some political issues as a result of that. Another issue that became pretty popular during that same era is the SOPA, Stop Online Piracy Act. Authorizes the Attorney General to seek a court order against a U.S.-directed foreign internet site committing or facilitating online piracy to require the owner, operator, or domain name registrant or the site or domain name itself, if such persons are able to be found, to cease and desist further activities constituting specified intellectual property offenses under the Federal Criminal Code, including criminal copyright infringement, unauthorized fixation, and trafficking of sound recordings or videos of live musical performances, the recording of exhibited motion pictures, of trafficking in counterfeit labels, goods, and services. So, SOPA, the Stop Online Piracy Act, would have allowed North American websites, your Googles, your Facebooks, your Wikipedias, and all that, to essentially tell the people whether or not they are able to post on the internet. Wikipedia, for example, which has a repository of a whole lot of things on the internet, could contain links to videos that are copyrighted, and that copyright may not be paid appropriately to the rightful owner. And this would allow the Attorney General to essentially sue Wikipedia to pay the copyright material to whoever is the copyright holder. And this would also apply to smaller sites, of course, because the idea here would also be that anyone who has any kind of access to any kind of copyrighted material could be held liable for it. But people like Google and Wikipedia, for example, oh yeah, Google is obviously part of this conversation because on a search engine, which is designed to search the internet, you will find links to all kinds of things, including copyrighted things, and therefore people such as the attorney generals could be able to sue Google for providing access to copyrighted material, even though this is just a survey of what exists on the internet. And the net result of that would be that, again, the US government would have essentially the ability to block websites from existing on the internet. So would it have access to the addressing system, which would allow people to see parts of the internet or not see parts of the internet. Similar bill, same here, the Protect IP Act, orders of the court on application of the Attorney General following the commencement of an action under this section. The court may issue a temporary restraining order, a preliminary injunction, or an injunction in accordance with Rule 65 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. So again, using an analog law to control what is happening on the internet against the non-domestic domain name used on the internet site dedicated to infringing activities, or against the registrant of such domain name, again, thinking of the addresses, or the owner or the operator of such internet site dedicated to infringing activities, cease and desist from undertaking any further activity on the internet site dedicated to infringing activities if the domain name is used within the United States, such internet website. So of course, the domain names are used anywhere on the internet, therefore they would be used on the internet. So once again, another law that would be allowing US lawmakers to control what is happening on the internet. And so there is obviously a whole lot of work here to be done, including the system, including making sense of that system. And again, at this point in time, you may be a little bit lost in this conversation because this is a little bit arcane of a system, but this is literally the point that we are making here, because at this point, there are a lot of people that would be affected by US laws that are very outdated and not completely designed for stuff that happens on the internet, and that includes copyright law. And so a lot of people, and including corporations that run websites such as Wikipedia, Google, even Amazon or Reddit, had to protest against these laws. Wikipedia protest hits home. US senators withdraw support for anti-piracy bills as 4.5 million people sign petition. Wikipedia, of course, had a 24-hour blackout where people were not able to access Wikipedia, as if the Attorney General had blocked the website for some kind of copyright reason. Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg opposes censorship law, says the internet is a powerful tool for creating open and connected world, blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. So lots of people complained, lots of people had issues with this system, and lots of people also celebrated this, such as the same people that were supporting to do this in that same year Tea Party patriots here celebrating the Stop Online Piracy Act being stopped. Amidst growing opposition, the Stop Online Piracy Act was stopped in its track on January 20, 2012 due to pressure from internet giants Google, Amazon, Yahoo, and others. The House Judiciary Committee plans to take up the act where canceled, and Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid called off a vote on its companion bill, the Protect Intellectual Property Act. Supporters of both bills held that the legislation would help the U.S. authorities crack down on piracy. Again, kind of celebrating the same thing that they were campaigning for just a few weeks earlier. The other members of the Senate Judiciary Committee had requested Senator Reid delay the vote so that concerns could be addressed. Texans have soundly rejected the pass now. Learn later approach that we saw with Obamacare, and the potential impact of this legislation is too far-reaching to ram through Congress in such an abrupt way. The Net Coalition, representing Google, Yahoo, and Amazon, supported the actions of Congress in recognizing the serious collateral damage this bill could inflict on the internet. So Texas rejected a vote that Texas had no part in to prevent the Republicans from controlling the internet, which they wanted to do, but in fact did not want to do. It's complex, it's complicated, it's nonsense, but it's also unprecedented. There was a book published about it, Hacking Politics, how geeks, progressives, and the Tea Party, gamers, anarchists, and suits teamed up to defeat SOPA and save the internet. The largest internet protest in American history took place, with more than 115,000 websites going dark, as well as more than 14 million Americans contacting Congress through petitions, emails, and phone calls. Many of my friends on Capitol Hill told me afterwards that the level of vocal opposition back home matched the volume of healthcare reform, one of the most contentious debates in decades. While many thought this final act against the Stop Online Piracy Act and preventing real online threats and economic creativity and theft of intellectual property act came together out of the blue, for me, it was the culmination of more than a year of working with local and national grassroots groups, engineers, venture capitalists, entrepreneurs, human rights groups, and Washington, D.C.-based public interest groups. Is this indigenous to the internet? That's a very good question, right? You get all of these people that are acting into the real world to allow for the internet world to be connected in real life, and essentially allowing for these two systems to either mix or match in some kind of way. This is unprecedented because there is an unprecedented amount of stakes available. There is also an unprecedented amount of stakes that is involved in this system. So perhaps in this context here, because we are able to get all these people to somewhat agree on something, we are reaching, in fact, a new frontier in world politics, maybe perhaps just US politics, in being able to have this system work on a somewhat bipartisan basis, somehow larger basis than the former systems that existed.